Hey everyone, thank you guys for coming. If you don't know me, my name is Grant Hagan. Like she said, I graduated from SRV in 2020, and I'm currently a rising senior at Gonzaga University, studying psychology and entrepreneurship. And I'm also the founder of the Keep Going campaign. You may have noticed my super stylish sweatshirt. There's a couple other people wearing them right now. But the Keep Going campaign is something I created. It's a mental health awareness clothing brand. And since May happens to be Mental Health Awareness Month, Ms. Wolford was kind enough to invite me to speak today. I'm going to tell you guys a little bit about my experience and my story with anxiety, kind of what that looked like for me, some of the things that helped me overcome a lot of that, and then also ultimately how that led to the creation of the Keep Going campaign. So my struggle with anxiety really started my first semester at college. But before I get into that, I want to tell you guys just a little bit about what I was like before that when I was in high school at SRV. I was, just kind of the average, happy, healthy high school kid. I played sports, I got good grades, I participated in a bunch of clubs. My family was super supportive, I had a good group of friends. I really had pretty much everything on paper going for me. I thought I knew what I wanted to do in the future, I got into a good school, and it never occurred to me that, I might be someone that would struggle with their mental health. Like, I was like, oh, I'm just like the, happy, healthy high school kid. Like, I know how my life is gonna be. So when I did end up struggling with this stuff, it really took me by surprise. And I tell you about my high school self, especially today, because I'm willing to bet that at least a handful of you, if not a majority of you, can kind of relate to my description of myself on some level. And I wanna let you know that, as good as things can seem from the outside, even if you seem like you've got everything under control, mental health is something that is really gonna affect everyone, and it's not something you can really just turn off because you have other things in your life figured out. So like I said, I began to struggle with pretty severe anxiety my first day, actually, of my freshman year of college. I remember moving into my dorm room, and I was just sitting in the corner. I felt sick to my stomach, so nervous, so anxious, and my parents basically had to set up my entire dorm room for me because I was just so anxious. I didn't feel like I could function. And I was feeling this way, and I told my parents, guys, I feel super nervous. I'm really anxious. I've never felt this way before. This is weird. And they're like, oh, it's okay. They comforted me. They're like, this is a big change. Going to college is this big thing. This is a big deal in your life. So it's okay to be nervous. That's totally normal. But once you get settled in and you make some friends and figure things out, you'll be good. You'll be totally fine. You're gonna love it here. I was like, okay, that makes sense, right? I'll get settled and this anxiety will kind of go away. So, I had these first day jitters, but then they continued, and then they have the first week jitters, and the first month. Then eventually an entire semester has passed, and things have just gotten worse from where they started. I was not motivated to be doing schoolwork. I was at an all-time low in terms of self-confidence. I was riddled with self-doubt. I had convinced myself that I was basically messing up all aspects of my life, and that I'm no longer that ideal, happy, healthy high school kid, and I should have been going to college, and I'm now just that anxious kid that can barely focus. I can barely eat. I was barely sleeping because of how anxious I was. And I was just in a really dark place, but one of the worst parts of all of that is that I felt completely alone. This was going into college. It's one of the times in your life where you're constantly surrounded by more people than you've ever been surrounded by at all times. And somehow I still felt as lonely as I've ever been in my entire life. I felt that no one would really understand what I was dealing with. No one would want to hear about what I was struggling with. People wouldn't want to talk to me. They wouldn't want to be friends with me. And that if I opened up about what I was feeling with and I didn't put on this face that everything was actually okay, that I'd kind of be ostracized and no one wanted to be my friend. So what I did is I kind of just bottled everything up. I just held it in, didn't really talk to anyone. And you can imagine that gets pretty painful. These emotions build up and up. And eventually I was at a point where I'm just so unsatisfied with my life. I think my freshman year I lost 20 pounds because I was so anxious I couldn't eat. Like I said, I was barely getting enough sleep, and I was at a point where I knew like something had to change, or like I wasn't gonna make it through college. So as scary as it was, eventually I did open up to my parents, thankfully, and they were very supportive. I found a therapist to work with, and I was great. But struggling with your mental health is it's a long process of recovery. It's not something that can happen overnight. You can't just change the way your brain is working. So it was hard. I worked with my therapist. Eventually I did start on medication because that seemed like the next step. But yeah, it was rough. It was a lot of hard work, and I didn't get immediate results. And there were a lot of times where I'd be frustrated that things didn't seem like they were getting better. I put so much pressure on myself to like be perfect and figure things out and feel better that when I didn't, and it didn't happen fast enough, I would just I'd kind of start losing hope. I would think like, oh my God, like, is this ever gonna change? And as much as I knew I had to continue to talk to people and work through a lot of this stuff, there were a lot of times where I wanted to just go crawl into bed or sit down and just live in my little anxious bubble and not talk to anyone and just suffer through college that way. But obviously that's not really a healthy way to deal with these types of issues. And when I would feel like that, I would kind of tell myself, I'd have these little talks with myself, be like, all right, Grant, like, I know this is hard, I know you're struggling, and I know it's not getting better as fast as you would like, but you're doing all the right things, you're on the right path, and this is not gonna last forever. Just keep going. Just keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going. And I would repeat this over and over and over. I would write it on my wrist, I would write it on notebooks, I even carved it on this bridge by my campus at Gonzaga, where I would go and I would feel particularly anxious. And I would just repeat this little 2-word phrase over and over and over. And eventually, I kept going, and I got back to that place where kind of like I was in high school, where I was happy and healthy, and I was making good friends, I was finally eating and sleeping better, I was doing better in my classes, and I really felt like myself again. And at this point, I started reflecting on that whole journey of everything I went through, being therapy, medication, all of that. I learned a lot of important lessons. A couple of techniques are on that sheet that you may have gotten. There's a breathing technique and another grounding technique. These are all really important things that I would practice and that helped me a lot. But every time I would look back on this whole journey, the thing that would stand out to me the most was just that little 2-word phrase, keep going. And I still could not tell you why this made such a big difference in my life, but for whatever reason, just repeating those 2 words over and over was really powerful, and it motivated me through the darkest time of my entire life. And when I finally was starting to feel better, I decided that this is something that I want to share with others, and hopefully it can help them as well. Which, as you can probably guess, is how the Keep Going campaign gets created. I have this message, and I know I want to share it, so what's the best way to do that? Well, I figured one of the first things anyone notices when they look at another person is the clothes they're wearing. And I figured if I wanted to spread this simple message, one of the best ways I can do it is put it in big, bright, bold letters in a colorful font right on people's chest, so that when they walk around, they basically become a walking billboard for me. And that was great. People have seemed to love it. There's a couple people in the crowd I can see wearing them, which is fantastic. But I wanted to do more than that. I can only reach a certain number of people through the clothes I sell, and the meaning behind them may not really reach everyone I wanted to. So in order to extend my reach, I decided that 10% of all of the profits sold from the sweatshirts and the clothes I make will then go to different mental health charities. That way, not only are people being affected by my message and the clothes I sell, but they'll also be getting or other people will also be getting help they need, because then these organizations that I donate money to also get additional funding to help further their work. So yeah, the Keep Going campaign has been something I've been working on for a long time. It's been really fun for me, but I really just hope that people continue to keep going and that they become able to talk about these things. I don't tell this story because I want you to feel bad for me. I don't want it to be like a sob story. I don't want to minimize anyone else's experience. Mental health is something that looks different for everyone. People definitely have had more severe problems than I have. Some people have something similar. But don't tell anyone this story again because I want them to feel bad for people with those issues. I want to start that conversation, and that's one of the biggest goals of Keep Going, is starting that conversation, get more people talking about their mental health, and I hope that by sharing my story, I can inspire people to share theirs as well. So if I can really tell you anything today, it's that everyone is going to struggle at some point. It may be right now you're struggling. You may have already had a struggle like this in the past, and yours may come in a couple of years from now. Maybe a couple of you are seniors, maybe it starts when you go to college. But at some point, everyone's gonna have these hard times in their life. And my advice to you would be to be patient with yourself, ask for help when you need it, and keep going. Thank you.